This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Welcome back, everyone. In this video today, I have something very cool that I want to share with you guys. So I have a copy of Ralph Gibson's new book. This is called Salon Littéraire. Salon Littéraire showed up in the mail, I guess about 2 weeks ago. This book is very thick, it's very dense, there's over 400 images, and it's extremely good. And so this is what I want to talk to you guys about in this video here today. So Salon Littéraire is comprised of photographs that Ralph has taken over a 50-year period of going to France. So it started around 1971 up to 2022 or so. So we're dealing with a very long period of photographs, a very wide range of work. It's a really interesting book, and it also deals with the whole idea and the concept of abstraction and how Ralph treats that in his photography. And I think that's probably what the most interesting thing to me is about this book. I'm also a little biased. If you're not familiar with Ralph Gibson, you probably don't watch my channel very often because I've done a lot with him over the last couple years. And I remember the first time that I saw this book, it was in conceptual form only, and I was at his studio a couple years ago when he was starting this process, and he was showing me the InDesign spreads. It was really cool to kind of see his thought process and where he was going with the project. And then later on, when we did some work together at Brilliant Graphics in Exton, Pennsylvania, they actually are the people who printed the book, did a beautiful job. This is probably one of the best printed books I have ever seen. Bob Tursak is amazing, nothing short of amazing. In fact, I wish he didn't call the company Brilliant because he takes away my adjective. They really are brilliant. They're incredible. I think they are the best book publisher in the United States right now. They've done a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff that viewers have sent in for mail on the channel has come from Brilliant. He's worked with Andrew Wyeth. I mean, he's just really good. And clearly, France being the inspiration, I think the other important takeaway is this concept of abstraction. I want to make some observations about this. And I think the best place to start is I'm going to read you Ralph's intro to the book. So Ralph writes, "Photography is the one major discovery from the 19th century that retains its philosophical effect. The medium accords the viewer both ambiguity and certitude in equal measure. Abstraction as the defining point of reality, a pure phenomena of physical fact versus psychic effect. One is positioned simultaneously within and outside of time, as it is in the photograph visual language, spoken, unspoken. It has been said that in France, literature and photography share the same cultural importance. The culture thus becomes its own transitive artifact, regenerating, self-reflecting, and autonomous. Add to this the arts of typography and lithography, as well as time, text, and narrative. Does a culture exist above or below the surface of its literature, or is it etched in the forms of its visual language? In either case, culture, as an inherent semiotic of human experience, is founded upon an infrastructure of shapes, leitmotifs, modes of formal construct. As always for this photographer, the pretext inspires the act, and modes of formal construct. The event intersects the cultural mark within the optical axis. Symbol is fact evokes the duality of sensation. Reality is the purest form of abstraction." So before we jump too deep into the contrasts of abstraction versus reality, I do want to make a couple notes about Ralph's work that might be helpful if you're not familiar with who he is. So Ralph is one of the great photographers of our generation. He came out of New York City, the post-Robert Frank school in the 1960s, which included other photographers such as Dwayne Michaels, Mary Ellen Mark. He is unbelievably good and still working today and still at the top of his game. I've done several projects with Ralph in the last couple years. He's somebody who inspired me very much early in my career. And if you'd told me back when I was starting to learn and I was really getting into Ralph Gibson's work that one day not only would I know him, but that we would work together, you could probably knock me over with a feather. But a couple things you need to know about Ralph's work. So most photographers work, well, within the single photograph or maybe within a series. Ralph's medium is really the photo book, and it's something that he's spent his whole career doing. And I think that's something that's really important to understand. The other thing to know about Ralph, other than the photo book, is that because the photo book, his work tends to work in a narrative or speak in a narrative form. And so as you're looking through the book, the pictures make sense as one progresses to the next or as one page progresses to the next. And so there is a narrative flow that happens there. Now, unlike a photographer such as Dwayne Michaels, where I could explain in verbal language what the narrative is or what's going on, Ralph's is a little more obtuse in the sense that the idea of abstraction comes in. So you're looking at photographs, and what do the two facing photographs on the spread mean when they put together? It's very intentional the way that works. A lot of times you'll find yourself that it's realizing that it's less about the subject and probably more about that narrative of what's being explained through a language of shape, line, as he mentions, leitmotif, textures. This is very important to understand Ralph's work, and it doesn't work if it's out of order or out of context. Everything is in a place for a specific reason. So having said that, one of my other absolute favorite aspects of Ralph's work is this idea of abstraction. And I'm going to bring out some images. These are just my observations. We're going to start with this one with the pink scarf. I love this because, and I've told Ralph this before, this sits right on that edge between abstraction and reality. At first glance, I noticed the pink scarf, but the figure's blacked out, and so I can't tell exactly what it is in context. And I think there's a mystery to a lot of Ralph's photos that he's so good at, and I love the fact that he does this without being too avant-garde or weird or blatantly abstract. It's very subtle. Another image that I love is this restaurant worker that's abstracted by the door. You only see half of him, but you can tell who he is. But again, it's one of those that at first glance, makes you look a little further and a little harder at what it is that you're seeing. There are many examples of this throughout the book. I think the violin and the chair is another great one. But the next thing that you need to start looking at is how the images relate to each other and what is that dialogue as you start to progress through each spread. And another one that I love is this obscured hedge. So it's this field of green here. And how does that relate with the notes on the sheet music on the piano on the opposing side? So the photographs are not directly related. You know, a lot of times, like for instance, in commercial work, commercial photographer for a commercial publication, that type of spread would have two things that are very obvious related. Sometimes it's two sides of the same image or the same subject. Sometimes they're just very easy to relate. And so what we're looking at here is something that takes it to another level. And what is that dialogue as you start looking at images that are opposing? And of course, because this is inspired by France, we're going to see a lot of French themes in here as well. Everything from music to literature to even the history of photography. And I love the way that everything must make sense in the order. And Ralph often does these appropriations that are just very fitting within here as well. I think it's a really cool effect and one of the things that just makes it really great. This is also very dense. As I mentioned, it's over 400 pages, and I think this is one of Ralph's best works to date. Another thing that I find very impressive in here, I mentioned that the print quality is absolutely outstanding, but the treatment of color in here is very curious to me as well, because you're talking about a photographer who's dealing with a body of work that spans 50 years, and I know Ralph very well. He made the move, like many did, from film to digital, and you're dealing with a lot of different technology in those 50 years, and so you would expect to see certain images jump out as digital color and certain images to jump out as, let's say, slide film or print film, for instance, and they don't. There's a consistency throughout that is very timeless in this, and I think that's a subtle thing that just makes it kind of push it that extra mile, and it gives it an enormous amount of soul, if you will. So this book is available on Ralph's website. I will put a link in the show description, and I also want to mention, for those of you who might be very serious about this, that Ralph and I are going to be doing a workshop together in New York City this April. I'm really excited about this. So Ralph and I have actually been planning this for well over a year now, and I'm really excited with what we've come up with. And in terms of, like, you know, what does the student want to get from something like this? The whole idea is that if you have something visually that you want to say and you want to come study with Ralph and I to have some input and to help you, you're going to walk away from this workshop at the end of the weekend with a portfolio of work. We're going to be very busy while we're up there. There's going to be some in-studio stuff with a model, and we're also going to do some stuff that's outdoors and probably more New York themed in that sense. And so we're really excited with this. Now, there are only 16 slots. We have a couple that are already filled, and so this will be the first weekend in April. I'll put all the details for this in the show description as well. We would love to have you there. This is going to be kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It was for me when I studied with Ralph the first time, and did not disappoint. So I think we're going to have something that is very cool. But back to Salon for a moment, and I want to talk a little bit more about Ralph's work because, like I said, I've been really deep diving this over the last 2 weeks, and there's some observations that I came up with that I actually mentioned to Ralph on the phone the other night, and it's kind of interesting. But I want to get into that. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, who are the awesome folks over at Squarespace. How easy is it to build an amazing website in a matter of minutes? Squarespace has you covered. It's dead simple. Head over to Squarespace, hit Get Started. You can start by selecting from an impressive collection of customizable templates, or you can do what I do, build your own. Something unique because, you know, you're not like other websites. Give your site a name. Next, you can build your homepage. We'll start with a few preset layouts just to get us going. Want to sell products like books or prints? Well, you can feature those on your homepage. Create a few more sections if you want. Let's also give it a color palette. There's a whole bunch to choose from, and just get us started. We can change this all later. Next, let's select the typography choices. Welcome to your website. Everything is set up and it's all ready for you to customize. Squarespace is built on Fluid Engine, the next generation of website design. Select Edit, and Fluid Engine allows you to drag, place, and resize any element on the page. You can snap these to a grid, you can make them float on top of one another, you can freeform however you like. You can even preview and adjust how the site looks on either desktop or mobile. The layouts are independent. Of course, you'll want a portfolio for your work. Creating an image gallery is as easy as dropping a folder of images on your web browser. Once uploaded, you can drag to resort, customize the look, and Squarespace writes all of the code for you. Everything just works and it looks fabulous. Want to sell your own prints, books, or zines? Squarespace has the capabilities to not only set up your online store and collect payments, but they also give you all the tools that you're going to need to be successful. Managing shipping and payment options, manage your orders, and engage with your customers. They even give you the tax tools that you need to keep things organized and stay compliant. You should try Squarespace for yourself. It's absolutely free, no credit card required. Just go to squarespace.com/AOP, sign up for that free trial. If you decide Squarespace is right for you, I can save you an additional 10% on your order by using offer code AOP on checkout. That's right, the code is AOP. So stop procrastinating, go build your website today. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So an observation on Salon Literaire that I want to share with you. So to back up a little bit, this is my copy of Refractions 2. This is a book that Ralph came out with last year, and I talked about a lot on this channel. And Refractions 2 is very different. It's a lot of text, and it's more of Ralph's thoughts and his approach towards art and photography in general. And I'm being very serious about this. It's very rare that you have artists that have thought about their work enough to actually put it into book form, and it's really a glimpse to get inside of Ralph's head is the way I like to put it. But Refractions 2, when I read this last year, cover to cover, really got me thinking in terms of this entire approach to photography, and I think that a lot of this stuff is what Ralph brings to it. Some of you may be familiar with the name Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin is a music producer. He's very good. He was a member of the Beastie Boys, and he's worked in pretty much every genre of music as a record producer. He's worked with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Johnny Cash, and done some really amazing work. He doesn't claim to be a musician himself, but he is a creative thinker, and he's done a lot of research into the whole idea of creativity and how we work as individuals. One point that Rick makes, which is an excellent observation, is if we look at our output as artists and what it is that we're creating, and this doesn't just apply to photography, this could be anything. So photography, sculpture, design, it could be music, whether you create an album, it could be creating a film, anything that is a work. These things tend to be diary entries on the trajectory to our bigger picture as creatives. So as you grow as a person, as you grow as a creative, as you grow as a photographer, that you're going to get better as you go along, and each one of these points of work represents the best work that you're able to do at the moment. A lot of times, musicians, photographers, we tend to get very emotional about these things, and we want to make them as perfect as they can be, and they're never quite good enough. And that's one point that he likes to make, is that it's important to pull back and realize that they are what they are given where you are in this point in time. It can't be your last work. It can't be your most epic work. There is more to follow. This is what's interesting about Salon Literaire, and I was mentioning this to Ralph the other night, is this breaks this convention considerably, and I think this is something that is inherently cool about photography. So this book represents images taken over a 50-year period. So if we look at the traditional sense of whether Ralph produces a book or just an image, that we see them one time in one certain context, and that is his diary entry for where he is at that point in his life. But when we're looking at a work like this, which involves taking 50 years of work, and here's the important part, is actually recontextualizing them. So think of context. Like an image works well if it's in one context. If I put it in another, it has something else it says. And so what this is a bit of a remix, in a sense, of this body of work into now a presentation context that is representing where he is in his life at this point creatively. And I think this is so fascinating, and it's something that really starts to challenge the traditional notions of what we consider to be creative output or what we consider to be art. You think of paintings. Well, the painters don't typically recontextualize their paintings, but then again, the past master painters really didn't work in a book format. So the format or the media starts to take advantage of some of these new possibilities. I think this is something that's very fascinating to think about. I think even just on the context of where we are with technology, I think about this all the time. Like I have my Lightroom catalog, and I have all these photographs that go back years and years in there. And I have found that some of those images actually I'm able to make look better just in terms of how I edit them. And this is not creative, this is just visual, but they look better because I'm looking at them with software that's better written. And so all of a sudden I'm looking at those old images, and much like what Ralph is doing here, do they contextualize with the newer ones? And this is something I haven't thought about until I looked at Salon. And so I think this is something that's a very important takeaway. I would love to know what you guys think. I will put links to Ralph's book and the workshop and all the stuff in the show description, so check it out. We would love to see you in New York next year. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.